This is Dave Brown. I'm here with Bennett Mortenson here at Tech Transfer at BYU, and we're discussing today this report, Generative AI Governance Framework. This came out and got a little news media coverage a little over a week ago, and the authors of it include BYU author David Wood, one of our professors in the business school, as well as people at Arizona State University, University of Duisburg-Essen, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, and then a consulting group or finance sort of group, the Conor Group. And what this is the first of its kind. It's a framework for governance of AI. You can download it for free online, Generative AI Governance Framework, and it's easy to find. It's the first of its kind, and it's talking about how you should govern the rollout of AI in large corporations. And to kick us off here, Bennett, we just wanted to discuss kind of what this is and the high-level findings. And one of the parts that was interesting to me is, a lot of corporations might sit back and say, well, we're just not going to get into generative AI until we know more about what it is. There's some uncertainty here. It'd be like being in 1994 saying, we're not sure if this internet thing will take off, so we'll wait a while. But so maybe a bad strategic decision. But also in the report, they say, while individuals frequently use Gen AI directly, for example, through ChatGPT, they may also engage with it unwittingly. And they talk about Microsoft Copilot as an example of that. The reality is, as a corporation, you can't ignore it. Employees are definitely using this, right?
Absolutely. And I think that anybody who ignores it is just going to be left behind, right? Like industries are literally going to change overnight. What's important in your industry and what you're hiring for is going to change based off of how it's going to be used in your industry. So if you're waiting for other people to figure it out, you're literally waiting for other people to outcompete you in the long run. It's just a huge mistake, as you already pointed out.
Yeah, and do you remember in the early 2000s when there was first, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek came out and people were outsourcing to other countries on an individual level for the first time, and you would hear these stories about some employee at a software company who had outsourced all his work to someone in India, and he was just sitting there doing whatever, like playing games, whatever. So I guarantee in all kinds of major corporations, there are people who have ChatGPT doing a huge portion of their work right now, and they're just sitting back. That must be happening, right?
Absolutely. I mean, specifically just thinking like copyright, being a copywriter was a huge kind of niche industry. And I'm sure there are people who their day has gone from spending all day writing content to now it's, 10, 15 minutes of editing a day, and they're getting the same amount of work done, probably at a higher quality.
Yeah, exactly. And so this report is it's aimed at the C-suite. It's like managers who might not be very technical thinking, okay, there's this new AI thing. What do we do about that? And so what do you suppose, if you're a manager of a major corporation, what are you thinking about AI right now?
I think what I would be thinking is I need to assume that everybody is going to use it for something, right? Even if it's just for drafting emails, right? Something as simple as that. And to go into it not being scared of it, but to assume everybody's going to use it, view it as a positive, and then what do I actually need to do to manage concerns about it, right? About privacy or data use or how it can be used at work, right? I think the more creativity you can give people, the better it's going to be and the better manager you're going to end up being. But those would be my top concerns, would just be how are they currently using it? And then how do I need to manage this to make sure that we don't release information that shouldn't be released or underutilize the people that we have because now they don't have any work to do.
Yeah, those are great considerations. And we're kind of, here in University Tech Transfer, we're kind of in startup world. We deal with a lot of startup companies. And so you and I have had this discussion that we're using a new AI tool right now. Like yesterday, we started using it and it's great. And so we see these things, we're like, oh my goodness, we can do so much more work, or we can do things so much faster, or reach out to so many more people or whatever. We'll do more stuff. But what if you're a 200-year-old company that's making the same product you've been making for decades? And how do you improve the bottom line? Probably by laying people off. So I know in some C-suites, people have got to be thinking, wait, AI can replace this department or something like that. That's what people are scared of. But in terms of cost savings, it's got to go on. And the report does deal with that a bit. It does have a section on operational and technology management. So as a manager, you would see that and be like, yes, that's what I want, right? But it also has a section on human, ethical, and social considerations. And that's where you're thinking we need to treat people humanely. One way it addresses it in the report is it talks about creating new jobs or new work opportunities based on the use of AI. So it's trying to take the perspective that we'll have people working with AI instead of losing their jobs. How realistic is that, though?
I think it's probably going to be realistic, but honestly, if it's such a time savings, you're probably not going to be able to create enough jobs to replace the ones that you can cut. But anytime that I've seen a company immediately go to layoffs, I always feel like it's such a missed opportunity for the company, right? Like you already have these employees hired, they already know your company, the culture, the industry, the ins and outs of what you're doing. And all of a sudden you found yourself in a situation where you've alleviated all of the non-value added work that they're doing, right? So
Yeah.
you can go immediate cost savings and cut 50% of your workforce, and that is a good short-term thing. But you're missing the opportunity to now redirect all of that time and effort into actual value added work into your industry, whatever that might be, right? Now, not everybody is going to be able to make that transition, right? If you were somebody who was answering the phones and transcribing those and then delivering them to a manager, I don't know how well those skills will translate into maybe creative thinking, but it's an opportunity to at least test it out, right? And at no additional cost to your company early on, as you're still trying to figure out what opportunities are available to you because of the AI.
Yeah, and I think one thing is, as a corporation, you would have to look at, well, I should say in the report, they have a great process for how you address things. It's step by step, come up with your high level objectives and goals. Here's how you create a framework for how you're going to move forward. This is a really good start, I think, for managers and the or for leaders of corporations. So one positive way you could deal with these HR sorts of issues is you might look at this as an opportunity to bring in-house things that you outsourced in the past.
Yeah.
Like you could say, well, we've hired a transcriptionist service in the past, and now we don't need to because we'll use AI inside. Maybe it gives us a little more control. Maybe it keeps data a little more private. There could be some upsides like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
And let's see, it has it's pretty exhaustive. A lot of the concern is on regulatory things. So I don't know that there is a lot of regulation yet. I think it's anticipating regulations to come, but obvious ethical problems, transparency, privacy, existing things like data compliance. A lot of people are worried, and we discussed this, that there are laws controlling data privacy, and if employees think that this is just like Google, we're going to use it the same way, they might be giving away data in a way that they haven't in the past and might not fully realize, right?
Right. Yeah. But I also think in that, if you are a manager or an executive, there's going to be a temptation to put in just excessive bureaucratic control over the use of AI. And if you do that, I think you are going to miss out on some of the benefits. So personally, I think a better approach would be to be hyper vigilant in watching how it is used and just expecting somebody somewhere to make a mistake, right? And try to mitigate that as much as you can, but to encourage the creative use so that you can make those mistakes early and then put in minimal guardrails or systems in place so that people can still be creative, still use it effectively, but maybe mitigate the chance of future data breaches or whatever it might be that you're worried about. Because if not, right, like I could definitely see a system in place where it gets so locked down and so tightly controlled that people are just like, oh, the heck with this, right? I'll just write it myself, or I'll just generate it myself because it's easier and I don't have to go through this crazy process of approvals and checks to generate an email for myself. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, especially if you're trying to manage it, but I would err on the side of letting the employees be more creative and more aggressive with their use of it.
Yeah, agreed. And when I heard about this report, at first I assumed it was going to be targeted at governments because one place where people have been pushing, Elon Musk, all kinds of people have been pushing for government regulation of AI because they see these kind of existential risks to it. But this is more like normal people, like managing corporations and how we use AI inside corporations. Still, like you say, I always when there's a new technology, I always get a little nervous about regulation. One of my favorite books is The Evolution of Everything by Matt Ridley. And he says, which has developed more in recent decades, the software industry or public education? And he's not trying to knock public education. He's just trying to point out that less regulated organizations change faster.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess what you're worried about is they could change negatively too. But when we see this huge opportunity here, you'd have to balance how fully do we want to throw all of this thing down.
Yeah, well, and I think the most obvious case study that I'm aware of that has to deal with that is the telecommunications industry, right? Where like cellular communications was so regulated for so long that it just couldn't progress up until what was it, like the 90s, when they finally alleviated some of those regulatory burdens, and then all of a sudden everybody could afford a cell phone, right? Because people innovated and made it accessible to more people. So same thing here, right? If you over-regulate it, it's not going to become useful, or it's going to become burdensome to use. So let it
Yeah.
be a little bit free as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Well, so this governance framework they came up with, it says they consulted with 1,000 reviewers, and it's not just people in the U.S., it's people all over, obviously an international university. And so they addressed all kinds of issues, legal issues, and so on. Environmental risk. One thing I keep hearing people say about AI is that it's high on power consumption. So we should worry about environmental effect of using a lot of electricity. What's your take on that?
It's not something that I would personally be worried about, right? I
Mhm.
think that obviously you want to be conscious of your energy use, but I have a hard time believing that. I haven't seen any data to support it, right? It's just kind of a talking point of like, well, it's really heavy on data or on energy usage. And I'm like, well, more than a person, right? Like more than somebody
Right.
spending.
That's what I thought.
If it takes me 8 hours to do it and it can do it in 5, right? Well, if it consolidated 8 hours of energy consumption into 5 minutes of energy consumption, yeah, it's going to look like it's using more. But is it actually a loss? I'm not sure. So I guess I'm not concerned. I would need to be shown a little bit more data to start being concerned, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't know.
And
What do you think?
well, yeah, no, I think any new technology, you expect there to be some inefficiency up front. I'm trying to
Mhm.
make the analogy again to the internet in the 90s. I'm sure there was something like that, like some environmental thing we were worried about, but technologies become more efficient over time. Like this one's moving really fast. So yeah, maybe it is wasteful in terms of energy right now, but I bet it'll be way less so in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like if you think of how AI is going to be used to better control the energy sector and
Yeah.
implement new ideas, right? Like the cost of that has to be outweighed by the potential benefit. Like I can't see a future where it's just like a pure negative always and forever moving forward. I think we'll figure it out, even if it is an issue.
Yeah, and the extreme optimists like Ray Kurzweil, people like that, like they expect AI to solve virtually every problem. And so,
Right.
like you're saying, the best thing that you can do to solve environmental problems might be to just let AI completely go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So other people would point out some risks, but that's the thinking anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I say, this report kind of newsworthy because it's the first of its kind. It does, at a minimum, show that we're at a point where corporations really need to think about AI and how they're using it.
Mhm.
And like I say, you can find it easily online, Generative AI Governance Framework. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Uh, no, nothing specifically. I think it's good that people are thinking about it. It does make me a little worried that we're going to end up with all these systems and procedures in places that aren't going to allow us to utilize it effectively. But I'd rather have the conversation now, right, and make a good case for a little bit more free use than just to get locked down because I'm not paying attention, right?
Yeah, once these policies come down, no, I feel the same way. If
Yeah.
you're a college student interviewing for jobs and you have two identical companies you might go work for, and one says we let you use ChatGPT all you want, and one says no, who do you go work for? Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned it in our last podcast that we recorded, but teachers who are cracking down on the use of AI, I'm like, that's such a missed opportunity, right? Like this could
mhm,
be the fastest way to teach your students how to like self-correct if it's writing papers or doing research or whatever it is. And
mhm,
you're not allowing them to utilize this tool that everybody's going to be using, right? It'd be like not allowing your students to check their math answers with a calculator, right?
yeah,
That's crazy, right? And just
yeah,
unheard of at this point. So I don't know. I think it's an opportunity to take advantage of it for sure.
yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, when I was like, I don't know, 7 years old, I remember you could program, like I was programming BASIC on an Apple II, right? Like it was early days of, nerdly programming somewhere. And at the time, it seemed like such a waste of time. Everyone felt like, okay, kids, go out and play instead of this. But in retrospect, if you were just trying to get ahead professionally, the best thing you could do was spend all your days coding back then, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
so ChatGPT might be a little bit the same thing. Maybe you should just let people use it.
yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
And by ChatGPT, I mean all the rivals too. So all of
Yes,
them.
of
But
course, of course.
okay. All right. Well, great. Interesting report, worth checking out. And thanks for taking a minute to discuss it, Bennett.
Yeah, absolutely.